Hi, and welcome to Homegrown Florida. I'm Patrina, and today is a very exciting day. Today we are going to be planting our garlic. And garlic is a very interesting plant here in Florida. Garlic typically requires that you have cold weather. It is one of those rare plants that, well, I won't say rare, but it's one of those plants that does like to have a cold snap, and it actually kind of tells the garlic to bulb. If you don't have a cold snap or a cold period of weather, you are going to have a situation where you're going to have a lot of green and a lot of growth, but no bulbing. So you can imagine that that kind of makes it a little bit harder to grow garlic in warmer weather. So what we're going to be talking about today specifically is how to grow garlic in warm weather, perhaps places where there isn't a frost or freeze that occurs. Where I'm at, I'm in Central Florida, Zone 9A, and we hardly ever get a freeze, although there is one in the forecast coming up, which is actually pretty shocking for us. We do, however, get frost on occasion. Probably maybe a handful of times throughout our winter season. So we certainly do not get enough cold weather to encourage garlic to bulb. So there's a few things that we have to do as opposed to our neighbors up in the north to get our garlic to grow down here. And we're going to go over that today. We're going to completely talk about all the different varieties. We're going to talk about all the different types of garlic that you can grow, how to make sure that it bulbs so that you get the perfect garlic harvest. And we're going to plant garlic together so that way you can see exactly how deep I place them and how far apart I place them. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm actually raking back my mulch. I had a pretty thick layer of mulch. You don't have to do this. I'm doing it mainly because I want to be able to see where I'm going to be planting my garlic. I want to see my spacing really well. So I'm actually pulling the mulch back. And then what I'll do is once I'm done planted, I will put all this mulch back into its place. And so what I have here is different kinds of garlic. So this garlic in this bag right here is what I grew last year. So I saved myself a few bulbs, the best ones that grew last year. Now I did not dry these out as well as I should. So there are some problems with these, and I knew that when I started thinking about growing garlic, I knew that these had a chance that they may not do well. So I also purchased some garlic. And I've purchased garlic in the past from M.I. Gardener, but I'm trying out a new place. And this place is Garlic Gods. I had to look that up. I couldn't remember. It's called Garlic Gods, and I purchased it, I think, back in September or something like that. And they mailed them to me in October. And then they have been sitting in the fridge since October. But I got 3 different kinds here. And you can see I have the whole head of garlic just like you would buy in the grocery store. They look exactly the same because they are. You could eat this if you wanted to. But these are very different than the kinds that you would get in the grocery store. It isn't quite as apparent when you first look at them. But they are very different. And the reason why they're different is all the different varieties I have here. This is a Susanville. And this right here is a Laura's Italian. And then the third one I have that I purchased was Insulin Red. All 3 of these, including the ones I grew myself, these are Insulin Red and Early Italian. They all are soft-necked variety garlics. So there's 2 types of garlics that you can buy. You can get hard-neck or soft-neck. And the main difference between them is in the center here where the root comes up and up into this center piece. It's probably more apparent here. This, when you feel it, is all very soft. That's your soft neck. And a hard neck would have a very hard spike through the center. It's the root part that comes up through the center. It's the stalk. And it would be extremely hard. And it would have a space in the center of this. I'll open it up so you can look at it. but that is a hardneck. Hardnecks grow up north. You could grow them down here. They probably will not bulb. They're probably not going to do well. I know that there is, I'm thinking of one person, Rob Greenfield, who was able to grow some hardneck varieties down here in Florida. God bless him. I don't know how he did it, but I guess it is, nothing is ever impossible. But if you want an easier time, definitely get you some soft necks. There's a third kind that you can get for even warmer weather. So maybe you're in a location like me or in Arizona where you get some nice frost and some freezes here and there. But if you're in South Florida, for example, where there is not a hint of a freeze or frost that ever occurs in your winter, you might want to look into some Creole varieties. There are Creole varieties. I like to think of them as a very soft neck type of garlic, but the Creole varieties are really meant for those places that have no cold weather, zero cold weather. So our northern friends, what they will do is, from what I understand, I've always lived in the South, but from what I understand and what I've studied, is our northern friends will take their garlic and they will plant it in late fall. Basically, it depends on when they're expected to get their first frost or freezing temperatures. They'll get it into the ground right before that, and then it's almost like the garlic hibernates. It won't grow, it won't pop out, it'll live underneath the soil through their cold winters or through their snows. I mean, it gets pretty cold, and and it just survives down there. It doesn't rot or anything like that. It just lives, and then when spring comes around and the ground thaws, it will tell this garlic, hey, you need to sprout, and then the garlic will sprout and the plants will come up, and that's how the start of their plants occur. Down here in warmer climates where we don't experience that, we have to do something, we have to mimic that nature. And so what we do is we actually take these guys and we stick them in the refrigerator. That's called vernalization. We're basically tricking it, making it think it's going through a winter underground in cold weather. And the fridge is perfect for this because your fridge is typically somewhere between 30 and 40 degrees. Should be closer to 30, and that kind of is like the perfect temperature for vernalization. It tells it, hey, you're in that space where you're getting that cold weather that you need to tell you that when you start to grow, you're going to bulb. And we leave it in there for a minimum of 6 weeks. You have to think about this, right? Like, what would nature occur? Would winter only be 6 weeks long? Probably not. But some places only maybe have a very cold time during 6 weeks. So 6 weeks is at minimum. I prefer 12. That's like a 3-month winter. That's probably a little more typical. And if you do up to 12, if you can, I know sometimes we don't get our garlic in time to do this, but if you can get them, you can ensure that it will not break vernalization. And basically that just means something inside of the garlic tells it like, hey, it's been long enough. It's been a long enough winter. You can go ahead and sprout, and when you sprout, you're going to bulb. But sometimes if it doesn't get vernalized long enough, it will sprout and it will grow and you'll think everything's fine, but it will never bulb because it has broke vernalization. And so that's why we want to get it in the fridge and just leave it alone. I like to keep it in a cardboard box or a paper bag because it kind of keeps it from, getting moist and breaking down, because you want it to stay in that fridge for a long period of time. 6 weeks is no short period of time, and 12 is even worse. It doesn't hurt to leave it in longer either. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything sitting in there beyond 12 weeks. Now, one time I actually left them in there for like, 6 months, and you started to see a lot of deterioration on the bulbs. So that is not necessarily recommended, but definitely get it in there for 6 to 12 weeks, 12 weeks being the better option here. Our next step is, when do we plant these in a warm climate? So I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not in my regular outfit of a yoga pants and an athletic shirt. I am in a sweater and jeans because it is cold here. We are getting our first nice major cold front that's coming through, and it is, I think it's like 60 degrees right now, which isn't very cold, but at night it's getting down into the 40s. And in I think 5 days, we are going to have a frost slash freeze. It's going to get down to 29, which is completely unbelievable for here, but it is going to get down to 29. And so when I see that temperatures coming on the horizon, that we're going to have a nice cold spell. And I don't mean 2 or 3 days, because that's typically what happens down here in Florida. You get 2 or 3 days where it gets nice and cool, and that might work, but really what you're looking for is that first good cold front, where you get temperatures that are colder at night than they typically are any other time of year. And so that is happening right now, and it's going to be happening for a solid 10 days. So this is perfect. But you don't want to wait too long either. So you're looking for that time to occur somewhere between October and January. Our October and our November here were very hot. I mean, it was mid 80s during the day, easy, which even that's a little rough for us. So we've been waiting patiently. Normally I would get these guys in the ground late November, but here we are mid-December. I think it's the 18th today, December 18th. This is the latest I have ever actually planted my garlic, but it stayed so warm here. We never got a cold front, and we're finally getting one. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm going out to the garden. So these guys are going in when you have a nice cold night weather. And if there's a freeze or a frost in there, even better. That is a perfect timing. It gives them a nice transition period from being in 30 degrees in the fridge to coming out here and getting those highs and lows that happen during the day. And so this is a perfect time. It's going to be like this for about 10 days. It won't stay in that freezing temperature for 10 days, but it will, frost temperature for those 10 days, but it will start to fluctuate a little bit, and it'll stay somewhere in the high 20s all the way up to the low 40s, which is going to be perfect for this guy adjusting, leaving the fridge and coming out into the yard. And from there, more than likely what will happen is our weather is going to warm up. We don't typically stay this way. It will get cold, and then it'll get warm. Then it'll get cold, and then it'll get warm. And I know there's a lot of people that are concerned that if you put your garlic in when it's a nice cold front and then all of a sudden it gets warm, is it going to mess things up if it gets cold again and there's another freeze or frost? Down here, where you maybe don't get a lot of freezes and frosts, there's no way that it's ever going to get cold enough that it's going to kill these. Even if you got down into the low 20s, it's really not going to hurt the plant. These plants are very, very cold hardy. And so even if they sprout and then you get another nice deep cold front come through, it's not going to hurt the plant. It's going to be fine, even if they've sprouted and everything else. So it's going to be fine. Just look for that first cold front. It's really what you're trying to do is get it a nice transition from inside that fridge to outside. And I want to just point out, always think back to nature, right? So in nature, when some of our northern friends are coming out of a cold winter, their spring will warm up, and then they might get another cold front. Warm up and might get another cold front. And that just happens naturally, right? So the plant is used to that. It doesn't completely die out in nature when those things happen. It recognizes that that's the weather and that's what it's used to. So think of it like that. So now that we got these guys out, let's crack them open so that you can see what we're working with. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure. So this stick right here that I have is exactly 5 inches long, and it actually has marked 4, 3, 2, and 1 inches. And I know that since I'm doing a soft neck variety here, I can do as close as 4 inches together. Now, if you're doing something that's a hard neck variety, you're going to want to do probably closer to 6. I'm going to do a nice in between, and I'm going to do 5. I'm picking my largest pieces of the garlic. There's a pretty significant size difference between some of these garlics. The cloves on the outside tend to be larger than the ones on the inside, so I really want my best foot forward here. So I'm going to use the largest cloves. The largest cloves lead to the largest bulbs. So you always want to try to use those first. And if I have space, I'll plant the smaller ones too. Otherwise, you can just eat them. The other thing you want to make sure is that your cloves still have the paper around them. The paper will protect them from being able to rot. Now, if some of that paper comes off, no big deal, but you want to try to make sure most of it is on there. If you accidentally peel the entire thing, you might want to take that one inside. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure how far I can be from the edge, and then how far I can be from this plant right here. I'm going to do a full 5 inches there, and then I'm going to go down 4 inches. So I'm going to set that guy right there, knowing that I'm going to plant right there, and then here's our next one. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a diamond pattern. So because I'm kind of working around some of these plants and I only have half a bed, I want to really utilize my space as much as possible. So I'm going to do a diamond pattern. And that will give me more space. So this first one is my Susansville. So I'm going to put my tag right down here, so I'll know in the future. I'm going to grab my other bulb of this one. Now this variety I'm very excited about because it does have some very large cloves. And I'm very hopeful. I mean, look at this one. This is like the biggest clove I've ever seen. And this is for soft necks. You know, for hard necks, you're going to have much larger cloves. But for soft necks, they're typically known for having smaller cloves. But you get more cloves per bulb, which, I mean, is kind of a plus or a minus depending on how much you want to peel. Okay, so we're going to get this one. This is going to be my lucky one, I think. This one is really big. So he's going to go right there. And you can see by doing like this diamond pattern, they're kind of offset from one another, which is what you're aiming for, and you can get more in a small space with that pattern. So now that we have our placement of all of our really good seed garlic, I'm actually going to start planting some of the garlic that I grew myself, and I'm just going to use a small space because I'm not really holding out a lot of hope for these guys. But I do want to see if I was able to, harvest and save some garlic that was, usable in terms of growing. And I will do this with these guys too, although I think obviously I need to do a better job of drying them so that they, properly hold. And so these guys are pretty small. The cloves you saw earlier were really big. These are pretty small, but that's okay. We're going to try to get the biggest ones. This one has some decent size. I'm still going to space them a good 5 inches from the last row, but I'm going to put them much closer together. So I got one there. I'm going to do these about 3 inches apart. And what you'll notice is that I'm just placing them right now. We haven't started planting them yet. And I do that just so I can make sure my spacing looks good, that I have enough. Garlic is one of those things that you plant it once and that's it. That's all you got. So you really want to do it correctly the first time. Okay, so now we have them all laid out, and now it's time to actually plant them. So now we're going to plant these guys, and I want to show you exactly how you do that. So if you remember from earlier, when this was still attached to the entire head of garlic, this was the space, the flat part on the bottom part of the garlic where the roots were coming out. And this pointy top was where the stalk had come out. And that's actually exactly how you want to grow it. Pointy side up, flat side where the roots were, down. And you want to go pretty far down. It's actually pretty surprising. You want to take it down at least 4 inches. So I'm taking my little tool here and I'm kind of opening up a spot, and I'm going to push this guy all the way down to the bottom of that 4 inches, making sure that that pointy side stays up. So here's another example. We're going to open that up and we're going to put that guy down in there, pointy side up, because his roots will start to form underneath, and then that pointy side is where you're going to have your stalk come out. Now, some people like to put these a lot closer to the top of the soil than I do. I like to do that full 4 inches, mainly because, and I suspect this is very similar to people who are very far up north, you want to insulate them. You want to keep them, for our northern friends, from getting way too cold and freezing. But for here, down in the south, we want to insulate them and keep them from getting too hot. When it's time for these guys to be harvested, they are going to be in the dead of summer. I mean, summer. I mean, some of these, like the early Italian that I grew last year, was ready in April. But other ones, like the Insulum Red and the Lures, I mean, they're going to be a longer growing one. So they could go all the way into June or July. And here in Florida, June or July is scorching hot. And these guys could dry out, die out, just not do well. They could prematurely bolt. There's a lot of things that could happen. So by planting them nice and deep, I can put the mulch back over, and as temperatures start to heat up, I can start adding more and more and more mulch. Almost like hilling potatoes. You want to keep them down deep so that they stay nice and cool. Let's get the rest of these done. So now we have them all in, and now what we need to do is cover them. Kind of do a little pack job over top of them to make sure that the soil is touching. That will help it make sure that they, start to sprout, and that they have all that good contact with the soil. Okay, so we've packed them all in. Let's get this mulch back over top. So now we have everything completely planted. It's so exciting. We have all of our garlic in. It is planted deep enough, spaced perfectly, used the perfect bulbs. It's the perfect weather to do it. Now we just cross our fingers and wait. I do want to tell you a little bit about maintenance. We're gonna keep talking about these garlics as they grow. Stay tuned for future videos. But one thing that's really important with garlic, especially in the beginning, is making sure that they have nice, fertilized, very healthy soil. And if you noticed earlier, my soil is very, very dark and it's moist. It clumps together. It is sticky, you know? And that is because I knew I was going to do this in this spot. And so a couple weeks ago, I took all the compost, every bit of it, out of my compost tumblers, and I put it only in this bed. I usually spread it out amongst maybe 3 or 4 beds because that's about as much as it will produce, and that gives it an inch or two of compost in one given area. This probably has 4 to 5 inches of compost in it, which is kind of crazy. But garlic, they are feeders. They like to eat. Last year, when I planted my garlic, they were struggling with the eating. My soil wasn't very good at that point. I was still working on the fertility, and so I started using a lot of fish fertilizer and my tomato tone in hopes that that would feed it enough. It didn't. And so then I reverted to using non-organic. So, the chemical stuff. And it did help, and they did grow. Unfortunately, that stuff ended up being too strong, and I had a lot of, what was it called? Brooming, where if you get too much nutrition in the soil during the later half of garlic's life, when they are supposed to go in bulb, instead what they do is they split apart and all of the cloves push shoots out. And that's called brooming. And that happened to quite a few of mine. And it took me a while to realize what that was. Now I know that those non-organic methods were producing way too much nutrients for them. So it's kind of a balance. I'm going to keep a watch on it. I'm going to look and make sure that the leaves stay green and that they look healthy. And I'm really going to be focused on letting this be an organic method. Very, very organic. If I get to around March, April, May, June, and I start to see them struggling, and that would be like light green leaves and those, just wimpy, then I know that I'm going to lay down some garden tone granular fertilizer and also the Neptune Harvest fish fertilizer. If you do use a non-organic, it's your garden, it's your choice. But if you do use one, I want you to just take my mistake to heart, which was overusing it. I used it once a month, and it caused an over-fertilization issue. So just think about that. Look at your plants, and if your plants are happy and healthy, they don't need it. And if I know a lot of us think of fertilizer as a way of like speeding up the growth of the plant, and I don't think that that is best for what the plants use them for. At least that's not what I use them in my garden. I'm going to learn to have that patience that's needed for these guys to grow so that they grow healthy and they grow according to their natural patterns of life. And then I found that you get the best growth and production when you allow them to grow naturally and you don't try to push them really hard to grow fast. And they tend to do good. The only downside of that is sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate, but today it is. So we're going to take advantage of that. So we got our garlic all nice and planted. That is it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching.